Welcome back to story time. Thank you for being here. Wasn't that nice having somebody new read to us? Jenny does a really good job reading books. And now I'm going to read 2 more books to you about libraries. So the first book that I'm going to read is Froggy Goes to the Library by Jonathan London, illustrated by Frank Remikwitz. These books are so funny, and we have a lot of Froggy books. But this one, he goes to the library, so I thought it was very appropriate for today. So let's find out what happens when Froggy goes to the library. Here we go. It was Saturday morning, and Froggy stayed in bed to read his favorite book. It was about Super Frog. Froggy, called his mom. What? It's time to get up, dear. We're going to the library. Yippee, cried Froggy, and he hopped out of bed and flopped into the kitchen. Flop, flop, flop. Let's go, said Froggy, and he started flopping out the door. Flop, flop, flop. First, said Mom, you have to get dressed. I know that, said Froggy. He was going to go to the library in his pajamas. That's pretty silly. And he flopped back to his room and got dressed. Zip, zoop, zup, zut, 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 zat. Then he flopped back, flop, 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 and said, let's go. I want to get books about Super Frog and T-Rex. But first you need to eat breakfast, dear. Yum, said Froggy. Home flies and ketchup. Ha ha. Munch, crunch, munch. Then Froggy raced out the door. Froggy, called Mom. What? Don't forget your book bag, dear. So you can carry home lots of books. I'd better take the wheelbarrow, cried Froggy. I'm getting tons of books. And off to the library they went. Squeak, squeak, squeak. In no time at all, Froggy had a stack of books so high that he couldn't see over the top. So he tripped over Polly, oops, and fell smack on his face, splat, and spilled his books. And that's when he saw Frogalina. Hi, Froggy, hee hee hee. Want some help picking up your books? I can do it myself, shouted Froggy. Please use your indoor voice, dear, said the librarian, Miss Otterbottom. First, Froggy read a book about Super Frog. He wasn't very good at reading, but he was very good at looking at the pictures. Swit, swit. When he got to the part about Super Frog flying high and fast after the bad guys, he stood on the table and spread his arms like wings. He stood on the table. Ooh, I don't think that's very good library behavior. Please sit down, dear, said Miss Otterbottom. It's not polite to stand on the table. Oops, said Froggy. Then he picked out lots of books about dinosaurs, especially his favorite, the T-Rex. Roar! Cried Froggy, holding his hands up like claws. Froggy, called Miss Otterbottom. What? This is a library, dear, not a dinosaur park. Oops, said Froggy. Sorry. Then Miss Otterbottom announced, story time, come gather around, children. Me, cried Pollywoggalina. Story time is for babies, said Froggy. He's wrong. Story time is cool and it's for everyone. But little by little, the book that Miss Otterbottom was reading got all of his attention. What a great story, thought Froggy, and he wanted to know what happened next. He scooted closer and closer and closer. And when she started doing rhymes and songs, he got so excited that he leapfrogged over Froggalina, he leapfrogged over his mother, and he leapfrogged over Polly, right smack beside Miss Otterbottom, and started singing, wiggle, wiggle, waggle, waggle, giggle, giggle, gaggle, gaggle. And the kids all laughed like crazy, and Froggy kept singing and dancing. Until suddenly it grew quiet, so quiet you could hear a fly burp. That's pretty quiet. Froggy took one look at Miss Otterbottom and, uh-oh, he knew he was in trouble. Oops, cried Froggy, looking more red in the face than green. Miss Otterbottom stared hard at him. Ooh, she's looking very cross. Then she smiled and joined in, and so did everybody else. Wiggle, wiggle, waggle, waggle, giggle, giggle, gaggle, gaggle, until story time was over. Thanks for being so, energetic, Froggy, said Miss Otterbottom, and she handed him the book she had been reading aloud and said, I'm glad to know that Froggy loves books. Come again soon. Thanks, cried Froggy. Books are the best, and he put it on top of his pile to check out. Then rolled his wheelbarrow full of books with Polly on top, singing, wiggle, wiggle, waggle, waggle, giggle, giggle, gaggle, gaggle. All the way home. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Those are awfully silly books. I like those. All right, so we have one more book to read today, and I'm going to read a book that I love, and it's called The Library Lion by Michelle Knudsen, and it's illustrated by Kevin Hawkes. But I'm going to tell you a couple things first. So there is a famous library in New York City, and it's a really beautiful building, and outside of the building, I'm going to show you, are two lions. See that? They're on either side of a big staircase. There's another picture. And their names are Patience and Fortitude. That's the name of the lions. And they kind of guard the library. And a lot of times at libraries, they're lions, and they're kind of guarding the books and stuff. And so I really like Library Lion, the book I'm about to read, because it talks about a lion, and it looks just like Patience or Fortitude. And I love the idea of a lion at the library. We have some other books here at the library. I wanted to show you this one. This is called The Lions at Night. And you can check this one out, and it's about what happens at nighttime. The lions get up and go all over New York City, so it's really cool. So there's this book too. I pulled quite a few books about libraries for you to come in and check out, so please do that. And let me read you this book, Library Lion. One day, a lion came to the library. He walked right past the circulation desk and up into the stacks. The stacks is another word for bookcases. Mr. McBee ran down the hall to the head librarian's office. Miss Merriweather, he called. No running, said Miss Merriweather without looking up. But there's a lion, said Mr. McBee, in the library. Is he breaking any rules? Asked Miss Merriweather. She was very particular about breaking rules. Well, no, said Mr. McBee, not really. Well, then leave him be. The lion wandered all around the library. He sniffed the card catalog. So, a card catalog. Before there were computers in libraries, there were card catalogs, and it was little drawers full of cards telling you where the books are. So that's what a card catalog is. We actually have an old one here that one of the computers is on. So come in and I'll show it to you. It's kind of cool. He rubbed his head against the new book collection. Then he padded over to the story corner and went to sleep. No one was sure what to do. There weren't any rules about lions in the library. Soon it was time for story hour. There weren't any rules about lions at story hour either. The story lady seemed a little nervous, but she read out the first book's title in a good, clear voice. The lion looked up. The story lady kept reading. The lion stayed for the next story and the story after that. He waited for another story, but the children began to walk away. Story hour is over, the little girl told him. It's time to go. The lion looked at the children. He looked at the story lady. He looked at the closed books. Then he roared very loud. Roar! Miss Merriweather came striding out of her office. Who is making that noise? She demanded. It's the lion, said Mr. McBee. Miss Merriweather marched over to the lion. If you cannot be quiet, you will have to leave, she said in a stern voice. Those are the rules. The lion kept roaring. He sounded sad. The little girl tugged on Miss Merriweather's dress. If he promises to be quiet, can he come back for story hour tomorrow? She asked. The lion stopped roaring. He looked at Miss Merriweather. Miss Merriweather looked back. Then she said, yes, a nice quiet lion would certainly be allowed to come back for story hour tomorrow. Hooray, said the children. The next day, the lion came back. You are early, said Miss Merriweather. Story hour is not until 3 o'clock. The lion did not budge. Very well, said Miss Merriweather. You might as well make yourself useful. She set him off to dust the encyclopedias until it was time for story hour. The next day, the lion came early again. This time, Miss Merriweather asked him to lick all the envelopes for the overdue notices. It's important to get your books back on time, isn't it, so someone else can borrow them. Soon, the lion began doing things without being asked. He dusted the encyclopedias. He licked the envelopes. He let small children stand on his back to reach books on the highest shelves. Then he curled up in the story corner to wait for story hour to begin. At first, the people in the library were nervous about the lion, but soon they got used to having him around. In fact, he seemed very well suited for the library. His big feet were quiet on the library floor. He made a comfy backrest for the children at story hour. And he never roared in the library anymore. What a helpful lion, people said. They patted his soft head as he walked by. How did we ever get along without him? Mr. McBee scowled when he heard that. They had always gotten along fine before. No lions were needed. Lions, he thought, could not understand rules. They did not belong in the library. One day, after he had dusted all of the encyclopedias and licked all the envelopes and helped all the small children, the lion padded down the hall to Miss Merriweather's office to see what else there was to do. There was still some time left before story hour. Hello, lion, said Miss Merriweather. I know something you can do. You can bring a book back to the stacks for me. Let me just get it down from the shelf. Miss Merriweather stepped up onto the step stool. The book was just out of reach. Miss Merriweather stood on her toes. She stretched out her fingers. Almost there, she said. Then Miss Merriweather stretched a little too far. Ouch, said Miss Merriweather softly. She did not get up. Do you see her feet there? She fell. Mr. McBee, she called after a minute. Mr. McBee. But Mr. McBee was at the circulation desk. He could not hear her calling. Lion, said Miss Merriweather, please go get Mr. McBee. The lion ran down the hall. No running, Miss Merriweather called after him. He put his big front paws up on the circulation desk and looked at Mr. McBee. Go away, Lion, said Mr. McBee. I'm busy. The lion whined. He pointed his nose down the hall towards Miss Merriweather's office. Mr. McBee ignored him. Finally, the lion did the only thing he could think of to do. He looked Mr. McBee right in the eye. Then he opened his mouth very wide and he roared. The loudest roar he had ever roared in his life. Roar! Mr. McBee gasped. You're not being quiet, he said to the lion. You're breaking the rules. Mr. McBee walked down the hall as fast as he could. The lion did not follow him. He had broken the rules. He knew what that meant. He hung his head and he walked towards the doors. Mr. McBee did not notice. Miss Merriweather, he called as he walked. Miss Merriweather, the lion broke the rules. The lion broke the rules. He burst into Miss Merriweather's office. She was not in her chair. Miss Merriweather? He asked. Sometimes, said Miss Merriweather from the floor behind her desk, there is a good reason to break the rules, even in the library. Now please, go call a doctor. I think I've broken my arm. Mr. McBee ran to call a doctor. No running, Miss Merriweather called after him. The next day, things were back to normal. Almost. Miss Merriweather's arm was in a cast. The doctor told her not to work too hard. I will have my lion to help me, Miss Merriweather thought, but the lion did not come to the library that morning. At 3 o'clock, Miss Merriweather walked over to Story Corner. The story lady was just beginning a story for all of the children. The lion was not there. People in the library kept looking up from their books and computer screens, hoping they would see a familiar, furry face. But the lion did not come that day. The lion did not come the next day either, or the day after that. One evening, Mr. McBee stopped by Miss Merriweather's office on his way out. Can I do anything for you before I go, Miss Merriweather? He asked. No, thank you, said Miss Merriweather. She was looking out the window. Her voice was very quiet, even for the library. Mr. McBee frowned as he walked away. He thought there probably was something he could do for Miss Merriweather after all. Mr. McBee left the library, but he did not go home. Look what's outside their library. Looks like patience or fortitude. He walked around the neighborhood. He looked under cars. He looked behind bushes. He looked in backyards and trash cans and tree houses. Finally, he circled all the way back to the library. The lion was sitting outside, looking in through the glass doors. Hello, lion, said Mr. McBee. The lion did not turn around. I thought you might like to know, said Mr. McBee, that there's a new rule at the library. No roaring allowed unless you have a very good reason. Say, if you're trying to help a friend who's been hurt, for example. The lion's ears twitched. He turned around. But Mr. McBee was already walking away. The next day, Mr. McBee walked down the hall to Miss Merriweather's office. "What is it, Mr. McBee?" asked Miss Merriweather in her new, sad, quiet voice. "I thought you might like to know," said Mr. McBee, "that there's a lion in the library." Miss Merriweather jumped up from her chair and ran down the hall. Mr. McBee smiled. "No running," he called after her. Miss Merriweather didn't listen. Sometimes there was a good reason to break the rules, even in the library. The end. Oh, I would just love to have a lion here. Wouldn't that be fun? We could just pet it and just a giant kitty, right? Thank you for tuning in today for National Library Week story time. And there's so many great books about libraries. So there's the craft that I showed you earlier, the bookmark that you can make, but there's also this craft. You can make your own library lion. I added this to mine and it says, "Roar if you love the library." So, roar if you love the library. Nice roar, I like that. I love the library too, and see, he's got a little heart right there saying he loves the library. So please come in and get your library, I love the library kits, craft kits, and I will see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.